Jack is a name repeated again and again in fairy stories, folklore, and even nursery rhymes. This is because Jack was once used as a stand-in term for a nameless man, similar to the way John Doe is used today, or as a generic term for man, as in everyman Jack or Jack of all trades. So when a fairy is called Jack, you can be sure it's not his real name. One of the most famous of the fairy Jacks is Jack Frost, the Frostman of Scandinavian and Anglo-Saxon lore, the Jökull Frosti, or Icicle Frost of Norse Viking tales. As his name suggests, Jack Frost is intimately connected with the ice and snow. He's the mischief maker of the winter months, known for nipping at noses and cheeks, turning them white with his touch, and biting ungloved fingers until they go numb. Though occasionally described as an old man, beard and hair dripping with icicles, Jack Frost is most often depicted as a sprite-like youth, a teenager or young adult, blue and frost-covered like a frozen corpse. Despite his chilly reputation, he is most known for his artistic talents. Indeed, Jack Frost is a master artist, a virtuoso who leaves his works scattered around the earth, wherever and whenever the weather permits. Beginning in the autumn, on the night of the first frost, Jack emerges and lays intricate patterns on leaves and grasses, and then, as winter descends, on windows and rooftops and over frozen snowdrifts. He winds icicles from snow drains, coats winter flowers in sparkling dust, and powders the world in white. A solitary figure, Jack Frost is the quintessential tortured artist or poète maudit, living separate and apart from other fairies in focused obsession with his work. But, like the winter itself, this fairy can deliver as much punishment as he does beauty. With all the weapons of winter at his disposal, Jack Frost has been known to attack with blasts of cold wind, blowing snow, and even avalanches. He's led victims astray in sub-zero conditions, blinding them with blizzards until hopelessly lost. Freak accidents in the winter can sometimes be attributed to this fairy, who has been known to materialize out of the blowing snow and then shove victims on the ice so they fall, causing serious injury or even death. Why Jack sometimes attacks is unknown, though his artwork is most important to him, and it can be sure that those who offend or destroy his work risk drawing his ire. What is even more mysterious is what Jack does during the months when there is no snow or ice for him to work with. Does he travel to the colder parts of the earth or the fairy world to continue his art? Or does he perhaps take a hiatus from his work, living in community with the rest of the fairies, free for a time of his overwhelming urge to paint the world? Maybe he even disguises himself as a human during this time, living amongst us quietly, invisibly, drawing inspiration from our interactions until he is drawn inexorably back to his work with the first frost. There's no way to know, but what is known is that when the weather is cold, this fairy is near, beautiful and dangerous as the ice and snow, and just as unpredictable. Imagine you are walking down a lonely road lined with forest. It's late at night, perhaps after an evening out with friends, and you're headed home. There aren't many cars at this time at night, and the streetlights are weak and flickering. You walk quickly, the only sound that of your own shoes clapping against the pavement. Then, by the side of the road, you see something. Eyes in the dark, and then a figure towering between the trees. It's a giant, 13 feet tall, body like a tree trunk, draped in leaves and branches and chains. Dangling from its chains are warped faces, twisting and yawning in anger or perhaps pain. Or maybe they aren't faces, maybe they are skulls dead and cold. You run. Lumbering footsteps and clanging chains chase after you, but somehow, some way, you make it home to tell your story. This experience, or something like it, has been recounted again and again by residents and visitors of Yorkshire, England, where a terrifying being known as Jack-in-Irons is said to stalk the streets. Very little is known about this particular Jack, only that he is a giant, that he wears chains, and that he appears to be dangerous. When Jack-in-Irons shows himself, it is always at night, by secluded paths and roadways lined with trees. Some stories portray him as a kind of fairy serial killer who wears the skulls of his victims on his person as trophies, and is ever on the lookout for new heads to add to his collection. But a puzzling fact about this fairy, at the very least, raises questions about this theory. The fairy people are known to despise and avoid iron. It may even cause them pain. So why does Jack-in-Irons choose to drape himself in this stuff? Perhaps he has not done so by choice. Chains, after all, are not usually worn for comfort. It may be that Jack-in-Irons is a fairy felon, forced to dress in chains and heads as punishment for some terrible crime. It may be that he has escaped imprisonment, but cannot escape his chains, or that the chains themselves are the prison and keep him bound to a particular place with a border he cannot pass beyond. It could also be that he has committed no crime at all, but has been imprisoned unjustly, tortured by his iron chains and the heads that dangle from them, screaming day and night in tones only he can hear. Perhaps when he appears to humans, he's not seeking to harm, but looking for help, his tortured form bleeding through the veil to our world as he struggles for freedom. But even if this is true, the risks involved in trying to find out are simply too great. For a fairy locked up like that by his own people must be dangerous indeed. And if he's innocent, the one who locked him up must be even more terrifying. So it's best to avoid this Jack if you can. Though, if you ever do hear his chains rattling by the side of the road, and you want to keep your head on your shoulders, do the sensible thing and run. Long, long ago, somewhere in Ireland, a man named Jack lived a dishonorable life. He cheated and he stole, he lied and he drank, and never did an honest day's work. He got away with it all because he was clever. So clever, in fact, he managed to fool the devil himself. Barred in death from both heaven and hell, Jack was cursed to forever wander the black between, alone in suffering as a disembodied spirit for the rest of time. He carries with him on his journey an ember inside a carved turnip, the only source of light in his dark life. This tale from Irish folklore is said to explain the origins of a mysterious and ephemeral fairy known as Jack-o'-the-lantern. Jack is a type of will-o'-the-wisp, or ignis fatuus, which means fool's fire in medieval Latin. Fool's fire are lights that appear floating over bogs and briars, moors and marshes, enticing travelers, leading them astray in the dark. There are very few descriptions of Jack-o'-lantern, who may, for the most part, keep himself invisible to the human eye, so that only his swaying lantern can be seen. What few descriptions do exist portray him as either a goblin-like creature, short and squat, with wizened features, as a small, fluttering, pixie-like thing, or as a ghostly-looking man with phosphorescent skin and gleaming eyes. If the Irish tale is to be believed, Jack is as mischievous dead as he was alive, whiling away his time in the afterlife, luring human travelers from their paths, causing them to become helplessly lost, or leading them to their deaths over cliffs, or into wild rivers, or the lairs of dangerous creatures. But the tale of Jack-o'-the-lantern is never complete without the story of Joan-the-wad. In Cornwall, wad is a term that once meant torch or bundle of straw. Unlike Jack, Joan-the-wad was never a human. Joan is a pixie queen, nocturnal by nature, who carries a lighted torch to guide her travels at night, or who herself emits a luminescent glow. Joan met Jack wandering alone in the darkness and offered him companionship, but only if he promised to behave. Jack, either out of loneliness or love for Joan, promised to do as she commanded, and has been her loyal companion ever since. For this reason, it's considered lucky to carry a charm dedicated to Joan-the-wad on your person when traveling by night. Upon seeing the charm, Jack will be reminded of Joan and his promise to her, and leave you unharmed. Other versions of this tale say that Jack was never a human at all, that he and Joan are king and queen of the pixies or piskies, and have always been, though she is the better behaved of the pair. Either way, tricks and rhymes developed over the years have proven an effective defense against this occasionally wicked fairy. Turning your clothes inside out while traveling is said to confuse him. Carrying an iron object on your person or driving an iron knife into the ground is said to repel him. And, of course, carving a turnip, rutabaga, or pumpkin and placing it in front of your home is said to be a ward against Jack and other fairies who may run amok on Halloween. Whether Jack was once a human or always a fairy king, his romance with Joan-the-wad is a beguiling one and keeps him in check. When with her, he's not a danger, but potentially a help. So if you're ever alone at night and get lost, you might try calling upon this fairy and his lady for help by repeating this rhyme. Jack-the-lantern, Joan-the-wad, that tickled the maid and made her mad. Light me home, the weather's bad. There is a witch down by the water, they say. Don't get too close or she'll catch you and drag you down, down into the darkness and the deep, and gobble you up with her slimy green teeth. This story, or something like it, has been told through the years to British school children to keep them from wandering too close to the water. But is this a made-up story parents use to protect their children from drowning, or is there some truth to the tale? Jenny Greenteeth is something of a minor celebrity among the Fae, showing up as a character in fantasy novels, comics, films, and video games. Also called Ginny or Jeannie Greenteeth, or sometimes just Wicked Jenny. She is described as a water witch or hag with green skin and hair like pond or duckweed. She lurks just below the surface of the water, in rivers, ponds, channels, wells, and pits, anywhere with enough water to hide in. And, with her unusually long and sinewy arms, reaches out for victims to drag below. A hunched figure on land who walks with a crooked gait and leaves a trail of pond scum in her wake. Jenny is always on the lurk for new victims. Children and the elderly seem to be her preferred targets, perhaps because she sees them as less likely to put up a hard struggle. But she has been known to attack adults when the circumstances are right. As for why she does what she does, it is generally agreed that Jenny is a carnivore, like a shark or crocodile, and views humans merely as a food source. She grabs a victim whenever the need arises, drags him down to her lair, and feeds off him, perhaps for months. Whether she also targets animals or other fairies for that matter is unknown. It may be that humans are her preferred meal, or that she only resorts to human flesh when other more appetizing sources are scarce. Other fairies have been known to aid her in her quest to fill her belly. Fairies like Jack-o'-the-lantern and other will-o'-the-wisp types have been known, when in particularly bad moods, to, with their bobbing lanterns lead travelers right to Jenny's watery doorstep. A cruel trick indeed. Though it may be that these fairies have struck some kind of deal with Jenny and have agreed to bring her victims in exchange for their own lives after inadvertently falling into her slimy clutches. There are no benevolent stories of Jenny Greenteeth, who appears to be entirely dangerous, though some have said she might be living out a curse, or even that she was once a human who was drowned and seeks to drown others for revenge. There's no way to find out the truth. Jenny is simply too dangerous to approach, so avoid watery places where she might lurk, especially spots where she could hide, where the water is murky or covered in duckweed, seaweed, or pond scum. And if you ever see her roaming about on land like a drowned thing, run for your life to somewhere high and dry. A peculiar fairy known as Jimmy Squarefoot haunts the Greenteeth district of the Isle of Man. With the head of a pig and the tusks of a giant boar, Jimmy appears as a kind of half-man, half-pig, with long dragging arms and big feet. Occasionally appearing only as a white boar, Jimmy is said to have once been the pig of a fairy giant who called him Squarefoot. This giant used to ride on Squarefoot's back, perhaps as his primary means of transportation. But one day, for reasons unknown, the giant disappeared from the island, leaving this pig behind to roam. It is also said that Jimmy was once a man. As the story goes, long ago a man named Jimmy was married to a woman he despised. He used to taunt and abuse her by throwing stones at her whenever he had the chance. One day she had enough, and either because she was a witch or knew a witch, called down a curse that transformed Jimmy into a pig man, and in that form he remains. If this story has any truth to it, then it may be that Jimmy has calmed over the years and repented his bad behavior, for he does not appear to be malicious in any way. Sightings of him hardly ever result in injury and never in death. He has been known to charge out of the wilderness at travelers, frightening them out of their wits, but has never come close enough to causing any real damage. It may be that Jimmy is just defending his territory, or else an important fairy path or fort, and doesn't want to hurt anyone if he can avoid it. If Jimmy's strange appearance is the result of a curse, he seems to have given up long ago on trying to break it. He never leaves his territory on the Isle of Man, and does everything he can to maintain his solitary existence. So perhaps he has accepted his fate. We may never know, unless some kind and brave soul finds a way to befriend Jimmy and drags out of him what it might take to break his curse. He will likely remain a pigman forever. Spider threads covered in dew, quivering in the sunlight, have lured many an insect to its death. The fairy equivalent of the spider at the end of that web is the Jorōgumo, or Spider Woman of Japanese lore. There is a spider common to the warmer parts of the world, including Japan, known as the golden silk orb weaver. This spider is renowned for its intricate and beautiful webbing, particularly for the webbing's yellow tinge, which shines like gold in the sun. Like most spiders, the golden orb weaver doesn't live for very long, though certain rare individual spiders are able to defy the odds, and the longer these manage to survive, the more powerful they become, as, according to Japanese lore, they gain wisdom and supernatural skill with age. Any spider able to reach the ripe old age of 400 crosses a kind of threshold and morphs into a Jorōgumo, gaining the power to shapeshift and cast illusions. At this age, the orb weaver is no longer content to feast upon the bodies of insects. her tastes shift to a larger and more challenging prey, human beings. Her favorite morsel of all being young and vibrant men. To lure this prey, the Jorōgumo requires more than a web sparkling in the sunlight, though she does use a similar strategy. The Jorōgumo appears as a young, beautiful woman in colorful clothing, whatever's fashionable at the time, though the patterns on it tend to match those on her spider body. Appearing in forests, caves, by campsites and cabins, near farms and towns, and even in bustling cities, the Jorōgumo goes wherever her prey is, a man she can find and keep alone. Normally, she'll choose a man looking for love, all the better to succumb to her temptations. She likes them handsome too, though it's not a requirement. Once she has identified her target, she lures him back to her home, where she entangles him in threads as strong as ropes and injects him with her venom. It may take days for a man to die after being bitten by a Jorōgumo, helplessly entwined in her spider threads, slowly going weaker as she feeds on his paralyzed body. Over the years, a single Jorōgumo may amass dozens of victims, her lair then appearing as an unearthed graveyard, filled with skulls and bones. So do whatever you can to avoid this creature, and always beware of offers that seem too good, too magical, too beautiful to be true. Thanks for watching, and special thanks, as always, goes to my supporters on Patreon who are helping to support this content. I really appreciate you guys so much, and just the extra support you're giving this work. It means the world to me, so thank you so much. If you like this content and would like to support it, please check out my Patreon page. The link is in the description. Don't forget to comment below, like, share, and subscribe if you're new, hitting the bell to receive notifications of new videos. And if you've got a true fairy encounter story to share, I would love to read it. My email is in the description. Please send it whenever you want. And until next time, this has been a visit from your scary fairy godmother.